So that brings us to today's event and the topic of the virtual workplace, and will this become the new normal? Many organizations, as we all know, it's companies, it's schools, it's higher education, it's government, it's everybody alike has quickly had to pivot to from a traditional bricks and mortar workplace setting to a virtual workplace due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And many, interestingly enough, have experienced better than expected productivity results, as the conventional wisdom was put to the test and in some cases proven wrong. So all that said, what will this shift mean for the long term with respect to workforce, talent, hiring, to corporate culture, to employees' morale and well-being, work-related travel, space and facilities, commercial real estate, long-term productivity? I mean, the big questions, are these early benefits being seen by companies and organizations sustainable? What are the trade-offs of this new way of working? And is it too good to be true? So these are the topics our esteemed moderator and panelists will touch upon today. So let's get started. I'd like to now welcome and introduce our panel moderator for today, Loretta Brady. She's a professor of psychology at St. Anselm's College, a community change agent, consultant, and writer. So Loretta, you'll be introducing each of the panelists. I want to welcome all of you and thank you for being an active part of today's event. So Loretta, you please take it away.
Thank you, Cindy, and thank you for your voice and advocating and organizing for this event and the series of events. I think this is really timely and topical. As you mentioned, I'm a professor at St. Anselm College, and among the courses I teach include organizational psychology. And so in that course, I have long discussed and covered topics related to remote workforces and distributed teams and global time zone management when you have deliverables. So I see this conversation as another layer to where does work fit in our lives? Where does life fit at work? And what is it like now that we're all working and living in the same spaces? Or, journeying in a world where that might be our future. So I will take this moment to briefly introduce the panelists, and we expect a dynamic discussion this morning. And so I'll let them layer in some other details as they answer other questions. But first I want to welcome Aimee Hodge from LSNE Contract Manufacturing. She's the Vice President of Technical Operations. And from some of our tabletop discussion, I understand you've been there for quite a while now, seeing the growth of the company. So good morning and welcome, Aimee.
Good morning, thank you.
Second, we're joined by Dr. Bilal Jordan, the founder and CEO of Performology. Did I get that correct?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Good. And where's your base?
We're in Nashua.
You're in Nashua, New Hampshire. Wonderful. And we're also joined here by Dan Scanlon, an agent broker with Colliers International. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning.
How are you today?
Very good, thank you.
Great. And John Whelan, Managing Director, Alexander Technology Group, board member and also co-chair for this BioMed Tech Committee. So you wear many hats, although this morning just a headset.
Just a headset. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Loretta. And welcome, everybody.
Yeah, wonderful. And I know that we are expecting another panelist, Dr. Kay Jankowski from Geisel School of Medicine at Dartmouth. She's an assistant professor of psychiatry there. And I believe that Josh was working with her earlier to get camera and mic on. So she might be popped in here momentarily, or maybe Josh will be in her stead. We'll get him here. Hey, Josh.
Hi, I'm not
Hey.
Wonderful. So you were professionally escorted into the space, so welcome. We're glad to have you. I think I just gave your introduction, but thank you for joining us this morning.
Sure, I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful. So, Cindy set it up really nicely. The past 4 months has really been just an evolving door of workplace and personal life changes that all of us have juggled. I guess in the roles that you have, I consider this time that we're in right now to be hybrid living, right? I recognize the reality for my family members. We have a number of vulnerabilities in our household, so we're managing remote for the foreseeable future. And then I know that when I go to the grocery store, there's folks lining up on Elm Street, sitting outside, enjoying the sun, enjoying food service. And so it really many more than two interacting. If you think about this moment, the future and your short-term and your long-term future around workforce recruitment, hiring, retention. How are you navigating those basics in this moment, and what are you thinking as you look ahead?
So sorry, you cut out a little bit there, Loretta. I guess I can start, a little bit of a response. That's a big question, first of all. So, I think it's there's a lot that has shifted very quickly for all of us, and you touched on a lot of it. So from my perspective, we, unlike individuals at companies, we're a services company, so we see hundreds of companies across the state. And so we get to see a whole wide array of how people are approaching this culturally, hiring process-wise, retention-wise. So it's kind of across the gamut here, like how companies are handling this. One thing I would say that I have noticed, though, is companies that innovate and that have adapted, that have moved quickly and realized, okay, we can't just keep waiting. We have a project to finish. We have a product to release. They're adapting. And then one of the things I love about technology is technology leadership generally is innovative, and they find new ways to do it. So companies that only a few months ago thought they would never be able to hire somebody that they haven't met and shaken hands with and sat, had lunch with, they're doing it. And we're seeing consistent outcomes, positive outcomes. We're not seeing any difference now over the last 90 or so days where people who haven't been met, how they're effective in their hire and the ramping and all that. So companies are figuring out how to ramp effectively as they go. But so far the outcomes and the success rate is no different than it was for the past 20 years of doing staffing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at LSNE, we went to, when we went to the stay-at-home orders, we went to all virtual interviewing, which has been a very big learning curve for a lot of the individuals conducting them. But I have to say that the quality of the candidates and the quality of the interviews hasn't changed, though I do think there's an opportunity for some training around how to conduct a virtual interview and what you might look for and how you might conduct it differently than a face-to-face interview. For the most part, I like to require the camera, and so we can at least see each other, but some interviewees don't turn on their cameras. So there's probably some work to be done when you're first scheduling the interviews to set up expectations with both the interviewees and the interviewers to understand what the playing field is. But we have had some very good luck in the interview process, though it's been different. But I do think it'll likely be the new norm going forward. But I do think we need to take this opportunity to create training around that and some of the differences that people might experience during the virtual interview.
Yeah, great point, Aimee. I'd just like to add to Aimee's comment in regards to the video. At our company, being a technology company, we've worked semi-remote, semi-at the office for quite some time, so that has not been a significant adjustment. But what we did notice after COVID-19 is we started using video a lot more. Like our day-to-day work environment is always meeting with clients through GoToMeeting. But what we did see is that with most clients now shifting toward that type of technology, we actually started using the video a lot more. And so from both the hiring process, even interacting internally with our own employees, we've actually seen a much better connection, I would say, by using the video along with just the traditional, GoToMeeting, a Zoom call in which you're just sharing slides or using the audio. So I would definitely say, with hiring future candidates, I would almost require the video to be turned on so you can start to see that personal interest. And I think it really helps bridge the gap between, having that person right there in your same environment for a face-to-face interview.
Dr. Jankowski, I'm curious, not knowing your specific specialty, I know that you're in psychiatry, and I'm just curious if there's anything that we might be thinking about and drawing from as we are evaluating team members or prospects or potential job candidates through a video mediated setting rather than in person. Is there anything that we should be tuned into that's significantly different?
Well, just listening to what Bilal was saying, I mean, just first of all, I think, you know, actually being able to have face-to-face contact with people, I think makes a huge difference, right? There's so much more that we can understand about people and get a feel for people if we can see them on video as opposed to just audio. But I mean, you know, also just in terms of a workforce, I think, you know, I would really be looking for that flexibility, that adaptability to change. You know, I think this is not an environment where rigidity works very well right now. You know, and I think you need innovation and creativity and people kind of who are able to really kind of make those adaptations as needed. And I think things are just still changing so much and so quickly.
I'll add a little bit, Loretta, to the discussion.
Thank you.
When this first started, I found myself using the telephone a lot more than I had in the past. But I found myself doing that with people that I know. I called all kinds of people, clients, friends, and just checked in to see how they were doing. It was way too soon to understand what we were into and how long it might last. And I hadn't used the phone in that way for a long time. I'm a big email guy. You can't always reach somebody when you call them on the phone, so email allows you to reach out a lot. But then I found myself attending webinars. Webinars have proliferated, right, since this all started. And it felt a lot better communicating or interacting via video, as some of the other panelists have talked about. And then I found myself actually hosting video conferencing. And to Kay's point about being able to see people, what I was starting to feel was that in seeing people, I was realizing how much I was missing being in the office with them. Really wanting to get back and be one-on-one with people. So it's been interesting, but thank God for the technology that we have. I mean, obviously we're utilizing it today, but I've heard so many people tell me that they prepared for this well before, not knowing that this would occur, but getting things set up so that they could work remotely. And for a lot of people, unless you're in production and manufacturing, and that's a lot different than what we're talking about today, the simple ability to be able to do this has been fantastic and allowed so many businesses to continue in a way uninterrupted.
I want to thank you for sharing that, because I think you described, I think, so many people's psychological and sociological experience of the sheltering in place series of events, right? That we sort of all jumped into it, sort of like, okay, you know, we're more the merrier, we can do this. And, you know, thinking of it as a very acute short-term experience. And now, of course, we're recognizing that this is a rolling cascading series of events. But in thinking about, you know, the fact that we do have workplaces where we do have in-person, you know, high-touch work that needs to be accomplished that can't be done remotely. And then also there are aspects of the work or the support that makes that work possible that can be done remotely. And even within our own office spaces right now, some of us are at 50% capacity, so some folks can be in the office and some folks have to be remote. How do we establish expectations with candidates that we've hired, or how do we shift within our own corporate cultures such that there's this recognition and expectation of the elasticity of the physical people we see every day, if we see every day, but still that firm connection to the work, to the teammates that make that work possible, and then of course to the company itself, right? I'm just curious ways that each of you are thinking about that right now, or if you've started to implement strategies to help people accept the elasticity of their colleagues and themselves, but still be connected to the work and the organization and the teammates. Anyone want to jump in there?
Yeah, so I think one thing that LSNE had done even before the pandemic is that we had created a culture of what we call a guardian. So we had already set up a culture where we were looking out for each other. We were protecting our patients, we were protecting our clients, and we were protecting our employees as well as our facilities. So when we had to, we were about 50% working from home. So when we had to make that shift, we really did it under the archetype of that guardian, where we were all working together to look out for each other as well as the business. And I really think that set us up to have a successful work from home mix and on-site mix. So there, we see some of a little bit of resentment from the people who come in thinking that the people who are working from home or aren't working as hard or working as less. But for the most part, they understand that we're all doing this to help each other at the end of the day to keep and sustain our business. So I think that really set us up for success for the really fast shift to the work from home.
Yeah, great point. I'll add to that, Aimee. I think to Amy's point, a lot of it has to do with set within the organization, because I think if you have a culture that's built upon alignment, making sure that everyone is connected, everyone understands both what they need to do individually as well as what needs to be accomplished as a team, and there's good communication in place. I think whether you're working remotely or you're working within the office, I think you're going to really see the team kind of rally behind each other and people will be productive. And I think to the example about individuals who are working inside the office feel like they're more productive than those who may be working remotely. I look at that again as part of that whole performance management conversation. Do we have clearly defined objectives for the team members that are working remotely? Because if we do, and I can easily compare an employee who's working inside the office versus an employee who's working remotely and compare, okay, what was accomplished? Did it get accomplished on time? Was quality, effectiveness, all of those, key components measured? And so I think that more falls along the culture of the company and what type of management processes do you have in place. And I think the only thing I would say that's important to include with the remote workers is just making sure the communication is there. Again, if you can't meet in person, you just jump on one of these type of conference calls and have that collective team meeting where they feel like they're a part of the organization that's working right there within the company.
Yeah, I would add to that too. Another aspect I think, is empathy, right? And so, I manage a team of 6, right? So I'm responsible for, we have our little team here, and in a services organization, there's a lot of metrics management, right? How many of these did you do, and what were the outcomes of that? And but what I'm finding here is, the data for us, like it's a whole new world out there. Should we be doing more of X? Should we be doing less of X? And what is the new norm? Like, so the barometer, I think, is out there of what's the right balance is still being defined as time goes on. But I found that, that whole, the empathy piece is, okay, here's where we are. Here's what we need to do. How are you doing? Right? I have people on my team. I'm one of half of our team are, in their 20s and, no kids and kind of, living on their own or some roommates. That's a set of things that they have to deal with. And then the other half of us are, a little bit further in our careers, and we have multiple kids and graduations that are being missed and, all these things. So I think that's become, for me, I think our team has remained pretty productive, but a lot of it is like, you first. How are you doing? Every single day we do multiple quick little agile style video calls. How are you doing? What do you need? What's your schedule looking like today? Okay, now here's what we need back. Can you do that? And then it's just a constant dialogue. So without sounding like Planet Fitness, I think more of a judgment-free zone, and just realizing that people are juggling a lot of things and figuring out how to work in home 24 hours a day for months is the same place. So I think the empathy piece is a big piece, and really not clinging to some of the older dynamics, but just seeing, okay, where's this road leading and what seems to be the right vibe.
I think the empathy is a great point. I noticed too that, I think, to John's point about the different team members, everybody kind of went through the same thoughts, but they did it at different intervals. So it depended, what your home life was like and what you experienced. So there was definitely waves of people who felt overwhelmed, and then there were waves of people who felt depressed. And, we really worked with our managers to understand, kind of where each team member was at certain points and what they needed. Did they need, you know, did their work need to shift a little bit? Did their responsibilities need to change? Did they need some flex time? And so we really work closely with our managers to understand kind of each individual team member's need and kind of where they were at certain points in the process.
Yeah, I think what I would add is just, you know, I think it's a constant kind of juggle, as you guys were saying, of like being understanding and trying to kind of take care of employees while at the same time needing people to produce, right? So it's that balance, and I think you made a really good point about communication. I think communication is really key. And I think this is going to be one of those things where it's going to be interesting to see how we fare over time with all of this. You know, because I think there are people who feel really isolated at home, and or they're juggling childcare responsibilities and concerns about elderly relatives and their own health concerns. You know, and I think there's a lot of stress that people are under. And, you know, that requires kind of active management. That's something that we've been dealing with at DH, and in our department is really trying to consult with DH about, you know, how do you proactively help leaders manage their staff and their stress, so that, you know, to try to kind of really encourage people to be as healthy and resilient as possible. Because you want to kind of get ahead of it as opposed to dealing with the symptoms and the problems once they've already, happened.
I think one thing that's coming out of this part of the conversation for me is a recognition that the work done prior to pandemic are really building authentic connections and relationships between staff and with team members. That was essential work, whether we recognized it or not. The degree to which we were able to do that work as an organization or as a manager ourselves is the degree to which we felt that we knew what was happening as everything was shifting around us, right? That to John's point, that we could, you know, start a call with a quick check-in and know that that was going to be received in a real way, that someone could feel comfortable being honest in that moment rather than a cursory, no, everything's fine, hunkering down, you know, that those efforts prior and then being able to draw from that well of relationship was a really powerful resource. And I think we don't I don't know that the Tech Alliance has many relational resource conversations when it's thinking about workforce development, but I think that's what I'm hearing come out of this conversation. And I think that it's also being held up as this is what we're challenged to continue to nurture in a different way than we perhaps are used to nurturing things. To Dan's point, maybe it was hopping on a phone call. Maybe that's not the differentiator anymore. Maybe it needs to look differently, but that there's still a real need to cultivate real connections with our staff, with our team members, and with each other. So it brings me to that question of, you know, because a lot of the work that I do, mentioned teaching, a lot of the scholarship work that I focus on is on resilience and on equity, social equity. And so inclusion and diversity become big topics within that work. And when we think about a distributed workforce and remote work, right, it opens up, on one hand, it opens up so many possibilities for inclusion. So many individuals who, even prior to the pandemic, weren't able to reliably work outside of the home. So for those folks, it brings them into a workforce. As we recognize that this might be our reality for some time now, how are folks thinking within their organizations? Or is anyone starting to set up job recs that are intentionally remote, whereas prior to this moment, you might not have done that? Or are folks still thinking about those as hybrid or as eventually being in person?
I think for LSNE, we're thinking of more of a hybrid. We feel the importance of the face-to-face and the human connection, especially with us being a contract organization. So we work with clients across the globe. So, you know, even for our project managers to meet their clients face to face. We feel that that's very important, but we are looking at a hybrid, a more flexible model, which would allow people to work remotely when they need to. And we have found that, the productivity didn't decrease and in fact increased. And, we built that trust with our employees. So we're looking at that model.
I think to speaking to that point, for my own company, the folks that I work for, we're not quite there yet. I think at the moment, we think we're going to be back in the office at some point for the most part. I think there'll probably be a bigger probably allowance for folks that want to continue to work remotely. We have seen instances where people have productivity has gone way up working from home because they have some home things that they don't have to worry about driving an hour each way anymore, and they don't have to worry about getting home for X appointment, right? You can run out, pop back in, and finish something pretty quickly. But for clients of ours, there's a mix. There's still some folks that are, yeah, I know it's going to be remote now, but we need to know this candidate is going to be able to be on site, full time. It's like, well, when will that be? Well, we don't know. So it's kind of an unfair dynamic for a candidate to say, well, yeah, I guess if I have to be back on site at some point, where others are like, this used to be an on-site thing, and we used to spend a lot of time doing implementations at client sites, but now I don't care where they work. It's going to be all remote, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So we need folks in the seats today. I'm not going to worry about if they could commute to my office maybe a couple of days a week, maybe 6 months from now.
There are so many different business models. It's so hard to make a generalization. In a way, our business, commercial real estate, has been hybrid for some time. As a broker, I don't really need to be in the office. I'm out meeting with people. I can work from home. I can work from anywhere. I remember a few years ago, there was a serious power outage. I took my laptop over to Panera, and I worked there for the whole day. So that there are ways to work around it. But we're also a high-touch kind of business. It's important for us to meet with people. You do business with people that you like and trust. And I think it's possible, but I think it's more likely to build those relationships if you can have one-on-one interaction. And I also find that being in the office, and we have been an essential service from day one, so we've been able to continue to conduct our business. But we shut the office down for a while for staff. But staff is back now, we're coming back now, and the ability to just bounce from office to office and talk with people about things is really, really important in our business. The ability to sit with some of the staff that's working on marketing or research functions and interact one-on-one at a safe distance is really important to us. So I think it depends on the business. You can't make a generalization, and it's still too soon to tell.
Yeah, I think I'll add to that. I think, again, with Performology being a technology company, our situation is a little bit unique in that we're used to working and interacting with our clients remotely. But what I will say is that in a prior business of mine, we actually built a hybrid and a remote independent contractor type position. And so I have a ton of experience with this subject matter. But one of the things that I will state that I see even with our clients today is that I firmly believe that those individuals who basically view this as an opportunity, I think when you look at everything that took place with COVID-19, the entire world has shifted to the possibility of, I don't need to physically be there in order to take care of business. A lot of our clients are in the insurance industry, and they're talking about how many customers that used to still walk in their payments who now have shifted to, automatic debit or, paying online. I can tell you, I attended a birthday party via Zoom meeting that was put on by an aunt, who's in her 60s. Okay. And it really amazed me to hear her talk so loosely about, oh, Zoom is great. It's very easy. And so I think a lot of clients a lot of companies who will see this as an opportunity to say, hey, you know what, let me get ahead of the technology curve. Let me get ahead of the way the world is starting to shift post-COVID-19 and figure out ways to build that hybrid position or that remote position. And I think they're going to see a significant amount of success, because I think we've all mentioned those individuals who adapted quickly post-COVID-19 really did not see a decrease in productivity. And I think the same thing is going to happen 6 months, 1 year down the road. Those individuals and those companies who see this as an opportunity to leverage their business to become more of a, I'll use the word global, but it doesn't necessarily have to be global, but to view their business as, you know what, I'm no longer this organization in which we have to work with our clients and work with our employees on a, in-person basis. Let me figure out how I can leverage my company, leverage my workforce in order to have a greater success. I think those are the ones that you're really going to see an increase in productivity and really lead the future.
I think that's a great point, Bilal. We found similar, and Loretta used the term and Dan used the term high touch, right? So high touch, like close. So our business, we do technology staffing, but we're all local. We don't do national work. So, there's I could see a few people that I know out there and connections out there that are on this thing. But so we see our clients a lot, and we meet our candidates, and not a lot of services companies do that, especially in my, it's recruiting has become a national organization, so you don't always do that. But for us, very early on, to Bilal's point, we jumped right on the video piece, and my team in particular, we did a good job, I think, jumping on this early, and relationships that were there became like bonds. Not to sound too corny, because you got an opportunity to talk to people. And hey, I know you're not hiring, and I know that things are kind of crazy right now. Like, how are you doing? Like, I'm not able to come by your office and have a cup of coffee with you, and I just, how are you doing? What are you guys doing? So, you see dogs barking in the background, and somebody, telling the kids, I'm on a call, give me 2 minutes, and so it's like an equalizer. More client and buyer and buyee. You're no longer recruiter, and it's just a couple of people talking, and a lot of those business conversations really were just talking about how you're getting through things. And so to your point, like, relationships were there beforehand, but I feel like, it just became people. You just became people talking to other people, and how are you dealing with this stuff? Similar to this conversation today. How's everybody doing with things? So, I thought that video piece was really critical early on to just keep that, person-to-person communication.
Right. And also to be real about it, right? That it's video, and I'm not going to pretend that everything behind you isn't happening, right? That I'm going to see you. I'm going to see the space that you're in, and I'm going to recognize that we are having this moment, but that you're also in another moment too, and I'm going to bring that into this, right? I know that there's some questions that came in through Q&A, and I must have dissociated when this was gone over. I don't know how these get asked. Do I ask them? Does Josh ask them? Does anyone want to chime in? I guess I can just go through them real quick. Oh, there's a Josh. I see a little Josh coming in the room here. And Cindy. Everyone's coming to rescue me.
Loretta, if you want to weave them in, I know that they're, some of them were related to the earlier topics around culture and leadership expectations. So weave them in.
All right. Well, I see one got 6 votes, so I guess we'll just jump in there. Psychologists on the panel, and I guess psychiatrists too, so I think that's you and me. Kay, what's the science behind the fear or dislike of video? Oh yeah, so we're hearing all how essential video is and how it can deepen relationships, and then we all know that sometimes we don't want to turn our camera on. So any insight there?
Well, so I don't know that I have the definitive science behind the fear or dislike of video, but what I would say, I think some people don't like to see themselves on video. So I think that like brings up issues for people, it makes them more self-conscious. I think that's part of it. And I think it also gets at what you were just saying, John and Loretta, both of you, about I think it makes us all more human. So you can't separate out the boundaries as much of like my professional self versus my personal self. And I think that like for some of us, I think that feels good, and I think we like that, and we can go back and forth more easily. And I think for some people, they really need those structures and those boundaries. And so I think that you're going to see a range, just like you see a huge range of how people respond to COVID in terms of their levels of anxiety. You see a huge range of how people respond to that, right? Some people welcome it and, like the dogs barking and the kids fighting in the background. And other people are like, no, that's, that's my personal space. I don't want to share that. So that would be my guess.
Question that has to do with space, and I know that was one of the areas that I had discussed with Josh. So, the question that came in through our Q&A: do you expect corporations to rethink the need to have a big office moving forward, and perhaps opt to move in the direction of a primarily remote workforce? So we've been talking about that generally, but physically, space-wise, do you think we're getting more space, less space, no change, too soon to tell? Dan, I know this is your business, so I'm guessing you can jump in here.
So I think this brings up the issue of a couple of trends starting to come together and maybe collide. And to Bilal's point, adaptation is going to control how things go. Prior to COVID, we saw a dramatic change in the way office space has been used. Historically, we've allocated maybe 250 to 300 square feet per employee when designing office space. That had already come down to 100 to 150 square feet per person because of collaboration, working at benches, in cubes, and getting rid of hard-walled offices. Some companies don't have any hard-walled offices anymore. And the idea was to allow people to collaborate in one space. They might have little huddle rooms to go to, but it was collaboration. So the collision course now is with technology. Can we continue that trend and that desire by companies to foster collaboration by having people work remotely? Will a video conference like this be enough to continue the bonds that workers have started to establish by collaborating? I've heard the entire gamut from employers thinking, we don't need any space anymore. We can all work remotely. I'm not signing any more leases. To the other extreme, collaboration is very important to our culture. We want and need everybody to be in that office. However, in order to meet social distancing, we're going to need twice as much space as we used to have. So I think reality will come somewhere in between. And that word that you used early on, Loretta, about hybrid, that I think will control. Companies will figure out what works best for them. I don't think this is the end of the office market, but it's going to be a real big change, and it's developing, and technology will obviously play a huge role in how things shake out.
That came in, and two questions that I wanted to kind of focus on. So one question has to do with corporate social responsibility, and I see this connecting to the other question, which had to do with leadership expectations. And I guess, I see them both related, because I think the leader's opportunity is to, treat their employees with some social responsibility. And I think the organization's opportunity is to do that within its broader community or industry. So, this moment has called for a lot from companies and from employees. As we go forward, where are you seeing the opportunities for leaders, right? How do leaders really step up in this particular moment? And then are there opportunities for companies to step up and step into that social responsibility in a different way than they may have been so far? Or maybe decisions your companies are making around that have been informed by this recent series of events?
I lost some audio and video there for just a minute. But I think I'll go back to, for me, like the social piece of it, So in my role, I'm on the middle rung, right? I have a team that I work with, and I have owners and executive level to report to as well. For me, I just feel like that social responsibility. Everybody has their own particular compass, right? So I'm trying to socialize up what I think is the right thing to do and push back on whatever message. If I feel like, I'm not sure that the tone is coming off all that well. And at the end, though, people are going to kind of choose whatever message they want. I think for me, it's become more over the last couple of months to just make sure, like, hey, this is what I think is the right thing. I want to make sure that, we're taking care of people in the right way. One of the things, I'll just use an example. For months, people are afraid, like, can I take a day off? What happens if I need a breather? Will I? And I think just making from that perspective, just making sure people are getting what they need, and almost like, hey, I need everybody to take a day off here in the next week. Everybody take a day off, take a half a day, or do some of these things. So I think that's one piece, I think, is that compass piece. So for me, I'm just kind of trying to stay focused on what I think my team needs and respond to that.
I think from where we were at LSNE, we felt that, being good corporate citizens was important at this time. So we did, we have PPEs as part of our normal manufacturing. So we were able to donate to the local charities, governments, hospitals, and around all of our facilities. So not just in New Hampshire, but Wisconsin and Spain as well. We also did a charity fund drive for the local food banks. We had a number of employees volunteer to shave their heads if we reached monetary goals, and the company did match everything that we raised. So we felt that it was even more important at this time to be good corporate citizens and to push that initiative within, individual teams as well, coming and being flexible. To John's point, we have a lot of employees concerned that they shouldn't even ask for time off if they're working remotely. And we're telling our managers to tell them the exact opposite, that you have time off, that you deserve that time off, that you need to take a break from work, because the lines now are very blurred between work and home. So it's important that these people can, disconnect from the work environment. So for us, it was very important, and it has gone over very well with our employees. Again, kind of going back to that culture we set up of being guardians for ourselves and our areas.
You were able to plug into relationships with the organization to those local communities that had already been established even before. So it sounds like it was easy for you to kind of step in a bigger way into that role. It was, and we did it all, it was different because we did it all virtually. We raised money via GoFundMe, and we did we recorded the head shavings that the employees did, but it was all through social distancing and all virtual. So it was different than anything we had done in the past, but I think it was received very well. And it's kind of to the point we talked about at the beginning, it's being adaptable and flexible. That's so important right now. That we're at 11, and I wonder if the panelists would like to share any closing thoughts. I know there's some networking that we'll be going into after we close, but I'd love to hear any final thoughts you have about this moment that we're in and where we might expect to be heading.
I'm not a panelist, but I'll start real quick because I haven't seen anybody else jump in. Just a quick note for everybody, while we're going to pause the panel, the goal here is to everybody go back to the tables and talk about this and continue these conversations at your tables with your peers. So please stick around afterwards. We're going to keep this platform alive for a while so we can, continue to have those conversations with each other and with our panelists and talk through all these really good questions that we've been talking. All right, let the panel go.
Yeah, I'll jump in. The thing I would leave the audience with is, I think with any successful company, you have to be very open to change and be very quick to react and make the proper adjustments. And I think personally, as a company with Performology, we saw, COVID-19. We all sat down and said, okay, how can we make the post-COVID-19 environment work for us? How can we turn this into a positive? And I think that's what I would challenge, all business leaders to do, is just sit down and ask yourself those questions. How can I turn this situation into a positive as opposed to a negative? And that's what we did. And we implemented, I think one of the biggest things that have come out of this time with us is that we built a online education platform that's really having a big impact on how fast we can onboard clients and teach our clients and help them leverage our software a lot more effectively. And that probably wouldn't have happened had it not been for COVID-19. And so that's what I would leave the audience with is, try and figure out how you're going to make this work as a positive for your organization.
Yeah, I would add to that. I agree completely, Bilal. And in a few months we have seen really major changes in the world. COVID, economics, socially, a lot going on right now. And just when you start to think, as we're talking about workplaces, you think you might have the right answer, then the question changes and you have to shift again. So hard to say what the right thing is. I think the wrong thing though is waiting for something to go back to the way it was, and just kind of hanging on and hoping that things kind of change. And I think that for what we see in services, the companies that are just, I'm a little bit in the moment right now. I can't figure out my strategy 2 years from now because I don't know what the new baseline or the new foundation will be. So we're just moving forward. And, the whole fail fast thing, without sounding too corny, let's just adapt to what's going on, and then we'll figure out who we are, as it goes.
I'm fond of saying that change is one of the certainties in life, and we're always hit with change. Even before COVID, changes are coming at us all the time, and we need to figure out how to adapt, as Bilal says. That's the key. I mean, this is a big Darwin moment for all of us about figuring out how to adapt and thrive going forward. We'll figure it out. We don't know what it's going to look like exactly yet. In my world, I think that it's going to bring about shorter term planning. For most landlords like to look for 5 to 10 year commitments from their tenants. I think tenants are going to be reluctant to make that kind of a commitment going forward, and landlords are going to have to adapt to that, which means their lenders will have to adapt to that. So there's all kinds of dominoes that will fall and have to get back into place to accommodate the change that's going on. But we'll figure it out.
Okay, or Aimee, any closing thoughts?
Sure. I think, we talked a lot about it. It's that adaptability and being able to kind of change quickly. And, I agree with John that we can't wait for the old norm to return. We have to change and become adapted to the new norms and what things will look like going forward, and be able to kind of forward think about that. I agree that, people are probably had stopped some long-term planning, but we need to kind of resume that as this is going to be, the new norm for a while. And I know a lot of people hate that phrase, but unfortunately this is where we're at, and it's going to be it's those who will succeed are those who can adapt quickly to that.
And Loretta, if I could just jump in for a second. So we're a little after 11. I just wanted to add to Joshua's comment about going back into the roundtables, which we will do momentarily if we're getting ready to wrap up the panel. There are still questions that are out there in the Q&A. Feel free to bring those up at the tables. Each one of the panelists will be sitting at a table. We'll try to get everybody spread out so that if there's somebody specific that you'd like to connect with, please feel free to just find their table, and continue to ask your questions. So thank you, everybody.
Kay, did you have, were you going to make a closing remark? I thought I saw you.
I just noticed in the chat box that there are a number of people who are asking about work-life balance. So I was just going to quickly say, because, your comment about taking, encouraging people to take time off. And I guess what I would just say is sort of a general idea about stress is that, yes, I absolutely believe that everybody needs to kind of think about, okay, how do we use this as a positive and think about this, and change is inevitable and all of that. But I think we also have to understand that when we're really stressed, we often work harder. We often are not very compassionate with ourselves. You know what I mean? We actually forget to self-care. And I think that that's something that we just have to really keep on the back burner. And I think a lot of us who are driven, a lot of leaders, a lot of people who are like, okay, I've got to figure out this, the solution here. And we get into this mode. We see this in healthcare all the time as well. And, we strive for excellence. And that can be a double-edged sword, right? Because there's there's a risk with all of that about burnout. And so I just would put out a plug for kind of, we need to balance that with the need for innovation and staying focused and being innovative, with also really going, okay, there's, you know, there's another side here too, that we need to prevent everybody from burning out, not just our employees, but ourselves as well.
Thank you everyone so much for sharing this morning, and just being so willing to share kind of the ugly behind the scene adaptations that all of us were having to make there and that you've had to navigate with your teams. So thanks for that. And I guess we'll see each other on the event space. So
Thank you so much, Loretta.
thank you.